So here's Candace Owens saying something that I agree with.
Judaism is a faith. Israel is a state, and it is not above critique. And that what Bibi Netanyahu has done to the Palestinians since October 7th is a Holocaust. It is a Holocaust that is being committed on Palestinian children and women. And I'm not going to quiet my perspective on that, to kowtow to whatever the prevailing narrative is at the New York Post.
Okay. So far, so good, right? Great. Okay.
He's right.
She's right. Yeah. Okay. But then, so I had Scott Horton on my show who wrote Provoked, how Washington started the new Cold War with Russia. And so I was watching a bunch of interviews with him because I always do that to prep for my guests. I watch them on other shows. And I came across his conversation with Candace Owens, and it actually had a lot of really interesting stuff in it. But then I came across this part. So let's take a look at what Candace Owens has to say. It's a little bit meta. It's Candace Owens talking about a clip, and then we're going to listen to her, and then we're going to listen to the clip.
Until we separate ourselves from Israel's foreign policy, and I mean, when I say we, all of us guys, American Jews, blacks, Spanish, I don't care what you are. If you're an American, you need to understand that the biggest threat to our safety is completely being married to Israeli policy. Mm-hmm. And I am so sick of it. Like I said, I do not care. I will use my platform to speak against this because now Christians are dying. They have been dying in mass. And I'm tired of people pretending that they're shocked by it or that it's jihadists doing this without the involvement of the American and the Israel government. That is not the case. Okay. Like I said, I'm happy to see that there seems to be some friction on the Christian front. And I saw actually an evangelical, I don't know if he's a pastor, he sat down with Calvin Robinson. I don't know if you're familiar with any of these names, but this clip is making the rounds on X. And essentially he sat down with him. I'm going to show you a few minutes of it.
To play the devil's advocate, I have people sometimes tell me, well, Joel, but if we're thinking about Jews today, all right, like, how is this relevant? How does it apply? Let's get practical. If we think about the modern state of Israel today, and we think about, modern Jews today, well, Israel, for the most part, is not Talmudic Judaism, Joel. It's a secular state. It may only be 20% of Israel today that actually practices religiously Talmudic Judaism. The rest are just secular, much like a lot of people in America are secular. And this is what I would say, though. I think of Richard Dawkins, who recently said, and was so funny to hear, guys who have devoted their entire lives to destroying Christianity and then all of a sudden see the fruit of what they've labored for and say, oh, wait, I didn't mean it. Like turns out. And so what he said, the big line that everybody, all the Christians, we couldn't help but chuckle. It was when he says, well, but I did, I'm not a Christian. Yeah, I hate Jesus, but I like to think of myself as a cultural Christian, right? Because he knows what cultural Islam looks like. He's like, that doesn't sound good. I benefit from the freedoms and the liberties and the blessings of being, a cultural Christian. And I don't want to see that go away. I prefer church bells, and Christmas to prayer sirens 5 times a day, and kneeling down. Exactly. And so he's saying these things. And so here's my point. Even Richard Dawkins, a known atheist, recognizes that there is such a thing as, even though there may only be, let's say there's only 40 or 30% of America is actually practicing Christians or regenerate Christians in the true spiritual sense. And yet all Americans, whether they like it or not, whether they're even conscious of it or not, are swimming in a Christian milieu. There is a broader Christian culture. The same is true of Israel. So there may only be 20% practicing Talmudic Jews. But I would say that Israel as a nation has been shaped, even for those who don't practice, in the sense of cultural Judaism.
So I wanted to let that play out because I think it's really important, and I think it's important, and I am not an expert on the Talmud, so I'm not going to sit here, I'm sure you're not either, wax poetic about theology. We'll let people who are experts speak about those things. But to see people have some people have such a vitriolic reaction to people saying, wait, we need to understand people's theology. Like, what actually does a nation of Israel believe in?
Okay. Well, if she's not an expert in theology, that's humble of her to admit, but she probably shouldn't just show a clip of someone who doesn't seem to know what he's talking about. So she should have you on. Candace, I humbly suggest you have on Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro.
If she wants me, I'll be there. So this is so messed up. I don't even know where to begin. It's like literally the inverse of reality. And number one, the most religious Jews, the most anti-Zionist Jews in Israel the ones that right now are protesting because they want to draft them into Israel's army, and they're running around carrying signs saying, we'd rather die as Jews than live as Zionists. We refuse to become Zionists, and the Israeli army is designed to make people into Zionists. We refuse to be Zionists. We'd rather die. Those are the most, that guy, that ignorant fool referred to as Talmudic Jews.
Right.
The most anti-Zionist Jews in the world are the ones that follow the religion of Judaism, the Talmud, the most. That's number one. Secondly, the whole idea of Zionism was just the opposite. I mentioned before that there's the Bible and then there's the Talmud. The Talmud is what makes the religion of Judaism. The Zionists hated that part of Judaism that was contained in the Talmud because that's what made us not fight. The Zionists were the ones that changed Hanukkah from a humble holiday of a miracle that oil lasted 8 days to some war victory for independence. It's the Zionists that hated the Talmud. I'm reading you now from a book I prepared here for you. It's called The Zionist Ideology by a guy, Gershon Shimoni. This chapter is called Zionism as a Secular Identity, which is very important to know. Here's what it says. Talking about the Zionists, they favored religious traditions. And by the way, he's talking about right now the right-wing Zionists, the Jabotinsky guys, the revisionist guys, which today are running Israel.
Right, the Likudniks, right?
Right. They favored religious traditions insofar as these could be pressed into the service of militant nationalism. They stridently extolled whatever strange of national assertiveness they could select out of the religion in Jewish history, and contemptuously rejected whatever smacked of abstract spirituality and political passivity. In their eyes, the Bible, capital B, was the main repository of the positive elements, whereas theological spirituality and passivity were the unfortunately legacy of the Talmud and later rabbinic literature. In this respect, they were manifestly the heirs of Berdichevsky's Nietzschean diatribes. The Zionists hated the Talmud. They wanted to get rid of the Talmud, and they didn't want Jewish culture. Judaism is not really a culture. I know that last time we argued about this too. There is this Woody Allen, Bagels and Lox culture, but that's American,
Ashkenazi, sure.
That's Ashkenazi American, also New York, non-religious Jewish culture.
Larry David,
right. But Yemenite Jew doesn't have that culture at all. But we're looking for something that puts all Jews together, that makes them brothers. This culture wouldn't do it. But there is a culture. It was the culture of education. And culture is not what makes a person a person. Whenever, like Ashkenazi Jews, whenever groups get together and stay together, they usually create a culture. Like there's a culture of baseball players, right? But even if you chew tobacco and pour champagne over your friend's head when he has a celebration and give him a slap in the backside when he accomplishes something, that doesn't make you a baseball player, but that's baseball player culture. The Jews created a culture. That's not what makes them Jews, just like chewing tobacco doesn't make you a baseball player. But there is a cultural aspect of different groups of Jews.
So last thing I want to do, because we did say we were responding to Candace Owens, and we mostly responded to that creepy pastor guy. Okay. So I do want to just play a little bit of her waxing philosophical about Judaism and theology. So let's just play this thing.
I don't really know why we're so married to Israel. Like it gets into a longer and a deeper history, but we need to start speaking about what actually is Judaism, what actually is Christianity. We need to get back to the theological debate to really understand, like, what are we supporting? Why are we married to this? Why are we saying Judeo-Christian?
Candace, buy my book. You want to know about the theology, about Judaism and Zionism? Thank you, Katie. You want to know about Judaism and Zionism? I will tell you exactly. Thank you. The Empty Wagon. That's it. Zionism's journey from identity crisis to identity theft. It started with an identity crisis. The Zionists didn't want to be Jews, but they were oppressed by the anti-Semites anyway, so they decided on identity theft, to steal the identity of the Jews from the Jews and claim they represent them. She says that Christians are dying. I assume she means Syria, right?
I guess, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I assume she means Syria. Jews are dying too. And I understand she's concerned about her Christian brothers, sisters. I got that. That's not what I mean to criticize here. What I mean to say is that if you want to know the history of the Middle East, what was the first political assassination in the Middle East in recent history that I know of? I'm not a historian. I can't tell you first ever, but first in recent history. 100 years ago, this past June, there was an Orthodox Jew named Jacob de Haan, Dutch guy. And he was very close with the Orthodox Jewish community in Jerusalem. So they said, go to the British and tell them, we don't want Israel. We would rather live under the Ottomans, the British, whoever it is, but we don't want the Zionists here. Tell them that the Jews said, the Jews in Jerusalem, that was really the only big community in those days. Tel Aviv wasn't a big thing then. The Jews, we don't want Israel. We'd rather live with the status quo, Britain, Turkey, whoever. So he was walking out of a prayer quorum out of a hospital. They had prayers in a hospital, and the streets were empty. Strange thing. It was eerie. He was walking out. As he walked out, a man by the name of Avraham Tahomi, Zionist, asked him, sir, do you have the time? When he picked up his wrists to look at his watch, the guy, Tahomi, pulled out a gun and shot him in the chest a few times. He died on the spot. It was a political assassination. The Haganah, Israel's, then it wasn't Israel, but was later to become Israel's, later is going to be absorbed into the IDF. It was their paramilitary group, the main one. There were like three. There was the Jabatin, right? This was the main one, the Ben Gurion guys. Right. They ordered a political assassination on Dahan, so that he should never be able to go to the English and tell them that the Jews don't want Israel, because they claim to represent the Jews. All Jews are Zionists. All Jews want Israel. And there was a Jew who was going to go to the British and say, we don't want this. And they shot him. They assassinated him. Now, they found this guy in Hong Kong, this Tahomi, Israeli television. They interviewed him. And they asked him about it, and he says, 100%, like he would do it again. Dahan deserved death because he could have destroyed Zionism. They don't care about Jews. It was his 100th anniversary of his death this past June. And how do the Jews benefit from this Israel? How do I benefit from Israel? I just want to mention one thing. People say, in case there's a Holocaust, you go to Israel. Right. So first of all, if there is going to be a Holocaust, the odds are right now it'll be World War III, which will start from the Middle East conflicts because of what's going on with Israel. Two, I have no confidence that Israel will let in all the Jews. They'll let in who's good for them. In World War
like they did during the Holocaust.
Like they did during the Holocaust, yes. But number three, I have a question. Right now, there was about 30,000 Jews that were killed terrorism, wars, in Israel's wars or the Zionist wars, right? That's a crazy amount of people. That's more than people who were killed, like anywhere Jews live, Israel's the most dangerous place. Right. World Trade Center was between 2,000 and 3,000 people. This, you're talking about a country that was created in 1948. Look what's going on. October 7th, look what happened. And the amount of anti-Semitism that it generates all over the world, right? Let's assume now that we will be able to rely on Israel if there will be a Holocaust. So let's assume now in the event, let's just go with that now. We won't be able to rely on them, but let's assume.
But for argument's sake, yeah.
For argument's sake. Now, let's say 100 years from now, 200 years from now, there is no Holocaust. Tell me, this premium that we're paying for the insurance policy of having Israel in case there's a Holocaust, and in case we can get out, and in case Israel will let us in, and in case Israel itself is not blown up. Italy bombed Tel Aviv in World War II. I think 136 people got killed. Israel is not on the moon. Israel's a country, right? People can attack countries. They're worried about Iran. Assuming this is all true, how many Jews have to be killed before Jews, never mind who else are getting killed, but how many Jews have to be killed before the premium that you're paying for this insurance policy gets too expensive? Give me a number. If 1 million Jews are killed in Israel's wars and terrorism, and anti-Semitism continues to be intensified all over the world because of Israel, give me a number. 30,000 Jews already killed. That is before October 7th, approximately. They continue, and no end in sight. No end in sight to this conflict. Give me a number. 40,000, 50,000 Jews? How many Jewish lives are you willing to pay before this insurance policy becomes too expensive? Because it's a premium. These wars, these deaths, this terrorism, this unrest is there. They look at it as a premium that we have to pay for an insurance policy. And by the way, the Holocaust, it was terrible, both in the amount of people that were killed, the magnitude and manner of the people that were killed, right? Of the deaths. That said, how many people in the history of the world, from the creation until today, yes, there was anti-Semitism, pogroms, I got that. But a Holocaust, a guy that says, I'm taking an army and going all around the world and killing all the Jews so that there will be no safe place for them. How many people did that? Except for Hitler, nobody. Perhaps a Haman, the biblical Haman in the book of Esther, and that's open-ended. If there was a Jew in the North Pole, would Haman have gone after him? Not 100% sure. But whatever. Amalek, that's what Amalek would do. But fine, there could be another Holocaust. God forbid. I got that. But tell me, if in 200 years from now, there isn't another Holocaust, are you willing to say, okay, this was a mistake? The premium is too high. And who gets to make that decision? Netanyahu? Who gets to put our lives in danger and these people's lives in danger, even the Israeli citizens in danger? Because of what? Because maybe there's going to be a Holocaust and somebody decided this is worth it?
Yeah.
The whole thing is ridiculous.
It is, yeah. And it's not about, I mean, it's obviously not about that. It's a political project. It's not about saving. Yeah.
It's about identity.
And you can just look at the way that they dealt with the hostages.
Yep,
If
right.
you need any evidence of it. Yeah.
It's about pride. Yeah. Ben Gurion said when, after World War II and the Germans were paying reparations, so the reparations didn't go like to Jews, all over. Israel took it, and by the way, that's why I heard, I can't swear to this, that there are so many Mercedes, like taxis and stuff in Israel. Yeah. In any case, he said, mamlachtiyut, stateism, he called it, that if the Holocaust victims were alive today, they would say whatever is good for Israel, that's what is good for the Jews. That's it. This idea that Israel personifies the Jews, that what's good for Israel is an anti-Semite who loves Israel, all Jews should love him. Somebody who doesn't like Israel, he's an anti-Semite. Right. That Israel becomes the essence, the spirit and the essence of the Jews. The Zionists talk like this. That's what Zionism is all about.